My name is Nick Kleiner, and my purpose of this speech is to inform the audience of how constructive feedback plays a role of being a head football coach. So I interviewed Coach Gadbury, who is the head football coach at Pontiac High School, and he's rebuilding the culture. He explains that a big piece of building culture in a program is not only doing the little things right on the field, but off the field in the classroom, community, etc. And constructive feedback plays a role when a kid is not meeting the expectations in a certain area, and Coach Gadbury has to reinforce what is being expected of them and being a part of their football program. So you should listen, because constructive feedback is not only something used in sports, but it's used by your boss at your job, your parents, a teacher, or anyone with some kind of authority over you. It's best to learn now what it means to get constructive feedback and how to respond when it happens. So constructive feedback is an essential part of any sport, and it creates a line of communication between the coach and the player, leading to a more cohesive team. So being a coach this past fall, I had to use constructive feedback to get the most out of my players, and Coach Gadbury, having more experience in the field than I do, he shared some tips and also how it kind of differs being a head football coach. And I also did extensive research online about this topic. So the first thing I will describe is how to give constructive feedback to the team after a game or practice session, also how to approach giving constructive feedback to players to improve their performance right in the moment, also how to create a culture within the team where players are open to receiving feedback from both coaches or teammates, and any changes that he might want to make while moving forward when looking at this past season. So constructive feedback is essential, especially when coaching kids in sports. So I started off by asking Coach Gadbury, how do you approach giving constructive feedback to the team after a game or practice session? He explained the best way to approach these meetings is to put a lot of thought into the feedback and put time and effort into what you're going to say before you just say it. One thing I've done a good job at, he said, is getting feedback from other coaches before I talk with the team to ensure he's seeing all the perspectives, not just his. And something from an article I read says, describe your observations, point out the difference between what you have observed and the standards you agreed on. Kind of the same thing as he does, where he gathers intel from the coaches and see if it meets their standards they agreed on at the beginning of the season. If the athletes aren't meeting the standards, that's when he can reinforce what they said and what they can do to move forward and achieve those goals. So there's a few conditions that you must meet to ensure your feedback will be useful. For example, you have to have it aimed at improvement and growth. You can't judge or disapprove. Based on direct observation, you gotta have like proof of what you're talking about. Task-oriented, not person-oriented. You have to be respectful, and these are key attributes that he uses that he must follow when holding these meetings at the end of a practice or game to ensure that the athletes fully understand where he's coming from and will accept the coaching. So something from another article, effective feedback includes a description of the behavior in objective and non-judgmental terms, and a suggestion of what could be more effective, especially if the behavior has a negative impact. So when doing these meetings, he has to thoroughly describe what he didn't like from the team and show examples of what they did wrong and what they can improve on in the future without being judgmental. So after seeing how he prepares himself to give constructive feedback after a game or a practice, I asked him the next question about how constructive feedback plays a role in being the head coach. So like, how do you approach giving constructive feedback to help your players improve their performance right in the moment, and also a challenging situation that he had to encounter? He said kids will do things at a higher level when they know why they're doing it and how it translates to the game. When you're coaching a kid, they're just doing a drill just to do it. They can't see how it improves themselves in certain areas, and then you won't get as much effort or motivation out of them. Constructivism holds that through personal experiences and reflection, humans learn by forming their own knowledge and understanding. Information is actively constructed rather than passively absorbed. McHugh, page 3. So just like football, kids will only understand when they're actively doing the drill. When you explain it to them, they only get the basics. But when they perform, they see and feel how dynamic the drill gets and how it correlates to the game. For a challenging situation, he explained that early in the season they were installing like a special teams unit, and one coach taught it a different way than the other, and which in turn got back to Coach Gadbury, so he had to use like humility as a professional and an adult to admit that he messed up and how he could have done a better job of explaining it to him. Feedback is often necessary as it exposes blind spots that need to be overcome if the leader is to grow. Somers 1. This is Coach Gadbury's role when on the field. It is to see when the athlete does not use the coaching points to help them grow. So without his feedback, the athlete will never grow since they don't know if they're doing things right or wrong. So seeing how he uses constructive feedback in the moment helped me as a coach to better prepare for myself when I'm put into that position to lead again. I asked him my last question I had about how it plays a part in his overall motivation to change the culture of the school, since they haven't been the most successful in the past few years. So I asked, how do you create a culture within the team where players are open to receiving constructive feedback from coaches and players? And are there any changes you might want to make when looking back to the last season? He said the biggest thing is consistency, meaning he's going to coach you, or the other coaches are going to coach you when you're doing things right, but also when you're doing things wrong, but also when you're doing things right. Making sure that the balance of both is there, and it's not just negative. But when the athlete does what is expected and at a high level, you can't ignore that, so you have to make sure he has some satisfaction there. When asked what he wanted to do differently, he explains he wanted better communication from teammate to teammate. It starts with the seniors, since they have seen what is expected in these past few years, and what I read, peer correction occurs when learners rather than instructors point out errors of misunderstandings to one another and help them put them in right. It fosters learners' ability to critically reason and problem solve and support the development of soft skills, including conveying specific feedback constructively and communicating observations, comments, and actions in a manner that only others will attend to and comprehend. Chicago State University, page 9. Without consistent, fair reinforcement and positive verbal feedback, people will revert to their comfortable behavior, not necessarily because they don't want to perform capably, but because they aren't sure of what is. And that's Chicago State University, page 9. When there isn't a reward of some sort for doing, some kids don't feel inclined to go above average. So also, without having a balance of criticism and praise, the athlete will never know what is good and bad. Balancing negative feedback with positive feedback is one of the ways to soften the blow when asking someone to address a bad habit. As you suggest areas for improvement, praise them for things they do well. Approaching the topic in this way helps encourage a growth mindset, which is valuable asset for any employee, for any company in which they work. Champlain College Online. When working to improve a certain skill, if you focus on the athlete's strengths that correlate to the skill being worked on, they will have a better mindset that they can improve on other things that they aren't as good at. So with a year under his belt already, I believe Coach Gadbury has what it takes to turn the program in the right direction. The way he uses constructive feedback with his players is exceptional at the time. With time, the bright side will start to show. So reviewing my main points was how to give constructive feedback to players in the team after a game or a practice. Also how to approach giving constructive feedback to players to help them improve their performance in the moment, like a challenging situation he had to deliver. Also how to create a culture where the team is open to receiving constructive feedback from both coaches and teammates and any changes he wants to make. So again, constructive feedback is an essential part of any sport. It creates a line of communication between coach and player, leading to a more cohesive team. From the speech, you can see that constructive feedback is essential for anyone who's trying to reach their full potential. Constructive feedback is kind of someone watching your back and pointing out the things you cannot see to help you improve in whatever it is that you're doing.
She took them off.